What's up, guys? Let me switch screens here. Alright, we're going to be building a Mayako LE 2025. It's the latest, greatest Mayako with the, they're telling me it's all the factory upgrades. So we're going to get right into it. Hopefully you guys saw the unboxing videos. I've got the build pulled up on the page, so we'll go through and we're going to start with the shocks. I told you we were going to start with the shocks, didn't I?
Yep.
I had that funny feeling. Bag A was shocks, so we're going to start with shocks. Alright, so how we're going to do this is I'm going to have the video recording. We're going to build one shock. The front and rear shocks will be built the same way. And then I'll pause the video and then we'll go on to the next step after that. So, you have to pardon me, we're building out my trailer this time. Last time I was building in the house. So, you'll see some smoke floating in front of the screen. I'm a smoker. So, I'll be smoking off and on during our build video. Alright, that was bag A, by the way. So we got our front, our rear shocks, all of our shock adjustment blocks that go in our arms, and our standoffs for the towers, which we won't be opening that bag yet. So we'll start with a front shock. We'll do a front shock first. Pieces, parts. Alright, this comes with our newly upgraded Mayakos with the darker shock caps. They aren't, I guess they're more of a dark color. They aren't black like they look like in the bag when I was doing the unboxing. We got our shock bodies. We've got our shock ends, which it comes with long and short shock ends. We got our spring cups. We got looks like a newly designed boot. It looks a lot better than the other boots that we had, so I'm happy with that. And we got our seal kit. Comes with all of our gasket seals, everything to put them in there. And then I guess I'm going to have to dig the pistons out where they're at. I think they were in their own little baggie, if I remember correctly. And springs, we need those. Yep, there they are. OPA1 and OPB1. I'll be putting this car together with the springs and pistons that came with the kit. So here's what I'll do is I'll build one shock for you guys for the video. All the shocks will be built the same way. Of course, the rear shocks will be longer. But I'm not going to do a fluid fill on these things. I've got some pistons and springs coming. And then we'll revisit when that stuff comes in, and I'll show you what I'm doing and how I put all that together. So I'm going to show you the kit way first. And then towards the end of the video series, we'll do the add-ons, so you guys can see what's going on there. So on our manual, my pointer here on the screen, we've got a nylock nut, a washer, and we've got our piston. So we're going to grab one of these 5 by 1.5 pistons here. Comes in the kit. Grab our piston shaft. Oh, and Jeff's here helping with the build, by the way, guys. I told y'all I'd have somebody here with me. He's just being quiet. He's watching. It's his first time seeing a kit being built. Alright. So we've got ourselves a piston, nut, and washer on the small end of the shaft here. We're going to put a washer. Going to put a piston. Then we're going to put a nut on top. And then we're going to tighten all that up. Let me find my... Is that the right size? Possibly. Oh, that's not the right size. That's the right size. That's a 5mm. I'm going to use my handy dandy shock shaft tool. And we're going to tighten that bad boy up really tight. Using the shock shaft tool, it doesn't damage the shaft. Just make sure that when you spin it down, you don't let it spin inside there, especially if you got dirt on it, being an off-road racer. Everything has clay on it. That's why I got the paper towels down, doing the build. That way I don't end up with dirt and everything. Alright guys, so next, if we look at our sheet here, we've got our shock body. We're going to slide this through once we build this end. So we're going to take the caps off. We're going to take our ring off because there's a seal that goes in there too. And we're going to take our cap off because there's a seal that goes in there. Alright, so now that we've got that open, we've got an O-ring. I'm going to put some O-ring grease on this thing when I put it together. You can use silicone shock oil to do this also, or just a dab of gear grease. And then there should be a plastic ring that was on the shaft, and then another rubber seal. And then we've got our end cap here, which is an O-ring. There's a flange that sticks up, so when we put this cap back on here, the little flange piece is going to stick out through the hole, or stick into the hole, kind of line everything up like so. Then I like to take my shock tool and just snug it down. Oh, you know what? I forgot one thing. Y'all let me forget something. Why'd y'all do that? I hear y'all screaming at the camera now. Here's an O-ring. Let me take that end piece off. O-ring. Goes on there. Goes all the way up to the shock body. And then we got our centering ring. And that goes in there. Back in the hole. And then we tighten it up. I thought it felt funny when I tightened it up. There wasn't any seal there. Alright, so that part's put together. Now we got our piston. We're going to go in through the top. And that should go through once it gets past the threaded area. Should be nice and smooth. Should not feel any grit. If you feel any grit on there, check your shafts. Make sure you didn't mar it when you tightened up the piston on there. So that should be nice and smooth. Alright, now that bad boy is in there. Let's go ahead and put our rubber O-ring inside of our spring ride height adjustment ring. A little groove inside there, it fits right inside. Then we put it on the smooth sections on the bottom. Now I'm going to take just a dab of O-ring grease. And put it on there. That way when I put it on, the O-ring doesn't bind on the threads. Get a square on there and get it started. There she goes. Yeah, if it doesn't go on easily the first time, pull it off, do it again until it does go on easily. Because if you cross thread it, it's all aluminum, so if you mar that up, you ain't never getting it on there without some really good work doing some machining with a file. Alright, so we're going to run that. I'm going to run it all the way up to the top of the threads. It goes past the threads and then turn it back down on there a little bit. Alright, the purpose of the rubber gasket in there is so this doesn't like turn while you're driving. It kind of holds it. Alright, now we got that much put together. So the next thing we're going to do is, this is going to be a front shock, so I'm going to go with the longer shock end. We've got our swivel ball. On the opening, you're going to notice that there's a stamped ring on one side and not on the other. The stamped ring side is the side that the ball goes into. It's a little bit larger opening than the other side. If you try to put it in the other side, you're going to fight it. Now, you can use a pair of pliers or a shock tool that has the little pin to push it in there, which y'all heard my other videos. Y'all like this part. There you go. Snaps right in. Ball's in place. So, next what we're going to do is we're going to grab a hold of that shock shaft with that tool again. And we're going to get this end started. If you have a hard time getting it threaded, you can use a body reamer tool, which I'm going to have to do on that. If you have a body reamer tool, you could just knock the edge right off that opening just a little bit. Just a little bit. That way it gets a little bit more plastic bite. Come on, buddy. Also helps if you build these cars when they're warm. The plastic's softer. Cold plastic's a little bit more rigid. It doesn't help I got grease on my fingers too. And this is why I'm not going to build all 4 shocks in one video. take a little bit more off of that body reamer. There we go. I actually saw some plastic come off that time. There we go. Starting now. Just had to have the right amount of plastic taken off. Alright, so we're going to run this all the way up until it stops. You can use adjustable wrench to make things a little bit easier. You grab it on the flat part, spin it around. You can also take like a 2mm driver and stick it through the ball and spin it around. It won't hurt anything. Just make sure when it bottoms out, you stop. Again, check your shaft, make sure you didn't damage anything. Nice and smooth. No binding and grinding. Alright, so that's the bottom half of the shock that's built. So, next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our gasket set here. And it's not on the screen. Let me get down to that on the screen. Alright, so we're showing the O-ring on here. It's showing the flange part of the ring facing down towards the shock. So we're going to come down. It's like a little lip that faces down towards the shock body itself. Fits in a little slot in there. That's what it should look like. And then we've got one of our little screws right here that we're going to use to set it. Alright, so this tells you how to bleed your shocks right here. So it's telling you what shock oil CST to use with the size piston. So they're saying to use a 600 CST. It doesn't come with the kit, so remember all the fluid you're going to have to get from your local supply, or you're going to have to order some in. This gives you all the directions on how to bleed it. When I get the other pistons in, I'll do an actual full build of the shocks, and I'll show you guys how I do the bleeding and everything. So anyhow, I'll basically just run through what they tell you to do right now. So you'll take your shock oil, grab some out of the drawer here. That's Diff oil. That's Diff oil. Alright, there's some shock oil. That's some 35, which I'm not 100% sure what the CST is on it. It don't tell you on these. This is a factory team by Team Associated fluid. It's what my local supply house has. So what you'll do is you'll hold your shock to the side. You'll fill it. You'll continue to fill it until you have a nice little dome of fluid at the top. So you're going to hold it as level as possible. You're going to turn the bottom of it a little bit, and you're going to easily push it up and down at the very bottom, about that far. Holding it straight up and down. Don't tilt it like I just did until you notice that you don't have any more bubbles coming up. Now, a good thing to do is if you have a car stand, your car stand should have shock openings in the top. I don't have one cleaned off right now where I could show you guys. I don't think so. Do I? Do I have a car stand? Nope. Okay. Anyhow, there's a they got holes in the top of them. You can set your shock in the top of it. Let it sit aside. If it's warmer the bubbles will come out faster. If it's colder, you may want to take like a hairdryer or a heat gun or something and just warm the shock just a little bit, let the bubbles come out. So once you got the bubbles coming out and your shock fluid's filled to the dome on top, you take your cap. No, it's supposed to be a gasket. Oh, that is a gasket. No. So you're going to take your cap. You're going to screw it down on top. You're going to run it down till it stops. You don't have to go crazy. Just run it down till it stops. You got your hole here, which is your bleeder hole. You're going to tilt it up. You're going to push your shock in until fluid comes out of this hole, or until it bottoms out and it won't go no further. So then you got these little teeny tiny screws here. I believe that's going to be this one here, 1.5 if I'm not mistaken. Yep, Mayako used 1.5. So then what you're going to do is you're going to put the screw in the hole. You're going to tighten it all the way up. You don't have to go crazy with it. It's a little tiny screw. Just snug it. And you're going to take your shock and you're going to pump it. Pump it, pump it, pump it, pump it, pump it. About 15, 20 times. And then you're going to fully compress it. You're going to take the screw back out. You'll probably start seeing some fluid come out. And once you get the screw out, the fluid stops boiling out. You put the screw back in, tighten it all the way back up. That's bleeding your shock. Alright, once you snug that back in, then you can take your shock out. Oh, I didn't put the boot on. We put the boot on before we put the end on it. But you're going to take your shock spring. These slack springs right here in the kit. Goes on here like this. You're going to squeeze that spring back with 2 fingers. You're going to take your spring cap, put it on there. And then that goes on. So then you got a built shock. That shock is pretty much done. So that's how you build a shock. So yeah, you'll see extra stuff on here. That's for the other front shock that was in that bag. Like I said, the boot, I forgot to put it on there. I'll do it when I take the thing back apart. But the boot goes in here. Give y'all an idea. Take this all apart. So if you use the boots go above your end. It goes in, and then you kind of slide it up over this notch right here. That's what this notch is for, is to hold a little notch inside here. So it just kind of snaps up into place. So anyhow, guys, that's how you build a shock. So I'm going to pause the video right now. See, it's going to show you all this other stuff. Those are front and the rears. Next is going to be a diff build. So I'm going to pause the video and then we'll get into the diffs. Let me get to my thing here. Alright, guys. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to bag B. Let me get back to our sheet here. So, bag B is going to do our center diff first, which is the larger of the diffs. So Mayako uses a high capacity center diff. And what that means is the cup is more than twice as large. I'll grab one of these other ones for you so you can see the difference. So the other car brands are using a standard size diff housing. This is Mayako center diff. Uses more fluid. It keeps the fluid cooler. Air compressor. Keeps the diff cooler under heavy load during race conditions, so your fluid don't break down as fast. It lasts a little bit longer. Still recommended that you open your diffs and change them out every so many races, but a little bit larger inside. That's the inside of a standard. This is what the inside of every brand's diff case looks like, and that's Mayako's center diff. So our front and rear diffs are normal size, and then our center diff is large. So this is bag B. Bag B, center diff, or as they say in European countries, Sintra diff. They put the R before the E, sometimes Y. Y'all remember school? Y'all know where that came from. All right. I'm just going to go ahead and get everything out of all the baggies. This is our little red O-rings. They always put them in little Ziplocs, and they're always sticking to the Ziploc, and they're always a pain in the butt to get out, but there we go. All right, so, ooh, they even sent a lightened spur gear here. Wasn't expecting that. Okay, so space everything out so you can see what's going on. So we got washers here, or spacers, some with a large hole, some with a small hole. So before I even get started on this, I'm going to separate them out, large hole and small hole. Because the last thing I want to do is grab a handful of these bad boys and they're in the wrong place. Okay, so we should have 4 with a large hole, and then I think it's 2, 4, 6, 8 or so of the others. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So okay, so there's 12 of these. So we're going to end up with 3 of these on the cross pins, and then these will go on our out drives behind the seals. Okay, according to the book, we're going to start with a cup, a bearing, a gasket, a red seal, 2 of the large hole washers, a cross pin, or not a cross pin, but a stopper pin, and a sun gear. So here's our sun gears. Here's our stopper pin. Here's a cup. And then we're going to take 2 of these, 1 of the red rings. We've got our gear here. We got our gasket. So that's all we're going to need to get started on this. So we're going to put you can use some Losi gear grease. This is hot racing gear grease. I've got some O-ring grease here I'm going to use on that O-ring, and that's, like I say, you use the black or the white grease on here. Either one will work, but I'm going to use some of this hot racing grease here. Oh, we're going to need a bearing too. So you're going to take your gear here. You're going to set your bearing on there. Slides on. You're going to take your diff cup, get you some grease, a little notch in that thing. You're just going to kind of fill that notch up as good as you can. I don't think the hole in my grease is big enough. Not for my liking anyhow. There it goes. Alright. Now we're going to take and we're going to spread some grease all the way up that shaft there. So that's filled up and that's greased. We're going to take this, we'll set that right inside there like so. Just like that. So you're going to have your shaft sticking out the other side. Alright, so I've got some of this O-ring grease here. A little dab will do ya. I'm going to grease up this little red O-ring right here. And it's going to slide down and go into a notch inside the gear right here. It's got a little home right there. Then we're going to take these two spacers with a large hole in them. We're going to push them all the way down on there. It'll go all the way down. And we got our stopper pin, which is going to go in a hole right in the side of the shaft here. Going to get it as centered as possible, like so. Now, pro tip, take you some grease. Put some grease on the stopper pin, just like so. Reason being is, when you put this sun gear on here, and you fit it on that notch, that grease will hold it on so it doesn't fall off. If you don't put grease on there, it'll be loose on there, and then when you go to put it in the car, you're going to be cussing it out. It's going to fall off, and then you got to try to line it up and put it together. Alright, then we got our gasket here. It just sits on there. Line up the holes. Line up the holes. Use a driver if you need to get it in position. And there you go. Also wouldn't hurt to just put a touch of grease onto that, which I had some on my finger, so it kind of stuck in place. But a little bit of grease on it, just a dab of it, like a fingerprint of it on either side, and the gasket will stay in place and it won't slide around. So then when you put it together, because this, there again, gravity, we're going to set that down on top of the cup later on, so that helps. Alright, so now for the cup. So back side of the cup here, same thing we did with the gear. We're going to take a bearing, we're going to slide it on the outside of the shaft here. We're going to take our outdrive cup, do the same thing we did with the other side. We're going to fill the gap. I squeezed the tube better that time. A little bit extra on there, so I'll drag that up. Now you don't want to go too crazy with that grease. If you put way too much on there, what's going to happen is it's going to squeeze out, and if you do off-road racing, it's going to be bunched up inside of here in this area, and then it's going to hold dirt, and it's just going to grind that shit away. So I've got a little too much on there, so I've got an old paper towel here that I used to do tires. I'll clean some of that off. Clean some of that off. Perfect. Alright, now I don't have a big blob of grease riding in between there. Doesn't hurt. It's a little shiny in there, but it's not squeezing out. Alright, now we got our diff cup. So the same thing with the other side. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult because we're working inside of a cup. A little bit of O-ring grease. Put that on there. So, little trick of the trade. Set of pointy needle nose pliers. And grab it. Use your finger. Get it on there. And then you take your other two large opening washers. And I've done this a time or two, so that was easy for me. But normally you can have a little dab of grease on your finger, and you can fit them down on there, find the hole, and then slide your finger off sideways and it'll stay on there. So once you get those on there, take the tips of your needle nose and kind of press it in there. So when you do that, washers should be all the way down against the plastic. The O-ring should not be holding it up. If the O-ring is holding it up, you did something wrong. Alright, so we're going to turn that diff cup to where the holes are facing one of the longer openings in here. Tweezers also work for this, guys, so if you don't have needle nose pliers, I'm sure you got some tweezers somewhere. So we're going to take the stopper pin, we're going to get it in the hole, and the same thing as the other. We're going to center it up as much as possible. Now this side, you don't have to put grease on the pin because this ain't going to get tipped over. This is going to stay just how it is as we assemble it. So we got our sun gear with a notch on it. I'll drop that in on the hole. We're going to turn it until it is flush on the top. As you can see, it's flush, just like it was on the other side. Now, time for the fun. Let me go down our thing here. Okay, so as you can see, there's a whole lot of spacers going on this bad boy on those cross pins. And before I get into it, they have fluid in here. When I go to put the fluid in, I'll show you all exactly how much I'm putting in there, and I'll tell you what fluid I'm using and the reason why I'm using the fluid I'm using. So it's not the same as what they're telling us in the book. So they're telling us in the book that we should be using 7,000 for an easy to drive car, 10,000 for a more center drive. That locks your front and your rear diffs together a little bit more, so more forward drive. I use a heavier diff fluid than the 10,000. So yeah, we'll get there. Alright, so what we're going to do next is we're going to take our planetary gears. We got 4 of them here. We're going to take 2 of them. We're going to take one cross pin. We'll put a planetary in facing the center. On the other side, we're going to put another planetary on facing the center. You can put them all the way into where they touch face to face. Now we're going to take these spacers, we're going to make absolutely sure that they're separated. Make sure there's none stuck together. And we're going to put 3 on the other side. So 3 on that side. And then we got 3 on that side. So this is what it looks like. So now we're going to drop this in the diff case. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull these apart just a little bit to where you can see the flat spot in the pin. Right? 2 ways you can do this. You can either grab it with your finger and drop it in these squared off slots, or you can use your pair of needle nose, which is my preferred way to do it. Grab it right in the middle, kind of line it up, set it down in there, and then you're going to push them out. Make sure your flat spot's facing up. And then we're going to center that flat spot over that shaft in the middle. It'll make your life easier. Now, as you know, most other car brands, the shaft is supported on the ends, sometimes in plastic, sometimes with a piece of metal. This actually stays centered by that flat spot in the middle. These 2 pins interlock together and it kind of holds it centered. So there again, less restriction on the outsides. It's not that way on the front and the rear diffs, but the center diff is very important, and that's why they do it. Alright, so we're going to do this next one the same way. Point them face to face. There again, always check your washers, your spacers, because if you double up, your spacing is going to be whacked out and your diff's going to get hot and you're going to burn your gears up, possibly break one. I have one roll away here. There's 3. And because they're so small, sometimes when they're putting these kits together, you'll end up with an extra, sometimes 2. I've put kits together to where there's been an extra one stuck to another one, and I caught it before I built the car, so it wasn't so much of a big deal. Alright, again, we're going to separate them from the flat spot. We're going to turn this upside down. We'll get them apart just a little bit. I'm going to take my needle nose. I'll grab it. Or get it in there, and it's going to be crossed from the other 2. Turned a little bit when I set it in there. There it goes, locked in. Alright. So now our flat spots are locked in flat to flat. As you can see, our crossbars are pretty much straight. They have just a little bit of wiggle between them, but it's the way it's designed. And so that's what the inside of your center diff looks like before we put the fluid and the spur on there. Alright, so here's my tank. I use 15,000 on mine. Use whatever you like. Like I said, JQ recommends 7,000 for an easier car to drive, 10,000 for higher bike tracks, let's say. I've found that with the diff fluids that I use, the 15,000 works out for me. I like a little bit more forward drive. This stuff's super thick, and then they turn around and put it in the thickest wall bottle possible so you can't squeeze it. Alright, so squeeze it in the middle. Work your gears back and forth, let it settle down into the diff case. So they recommend that you weigh this stuff into your cars. You don't necessarily have to weigh it, but that's a recommended way to do it. The way to do it without weighing it is to add fluid until the fluid is level with the top of the top cross pin. You don't want to go any further than that, because when the diff heats up during racing, it needs a little bit of air to expand. And if you overfill it, it'll start oozing out of the ends and around the seals. I'm turning it ever so lightly, letting that work fluid into the open parts of the sides of the cup. If you spin it too much, the gears will start working their way up. Just let them settle back down. You turn it again. You can see that the edges are filling up. Okay. more. Thicker fluid is really hard to get in there and get it right. The thinner fluids are a lot easier. So if all you use is 7,000 or 10,000, you won't have to fight with it that much. Don't mind the background noise. I got a cooler in here that had to turn the plug on for it for my laptop to plug in. Alright, so now we got the fluid. These are kind of empty back here, so I'm kind of judging. So this is a little bit higher than what I want it to be, but because I've got these empty spaces right here, once I put it together and I work this thing in, it's going to fill those gaps up and it'll level out. So remember how I told y'all you want to put grease on this thing because you're going to have gravity working with you? Yep, here we go. So we're going to flip this over. We're going to line our screw holes up here and here. If you did everything correctly, it should sit right down in there and everything will go nice and smooth. Now I'm going to cheat a little bit. I've got me a power driver. I'm going to get my screws started with the power driver, and before it tightens all the way up, I'm going to take a hand nut driver or a hand hex. I said I'm not running it all the way down. There's a little gap there. I hand tighten it. And this is just a cheap racer's edge rechargeable drill. Some people use DeWalt, Ryobi, Milwaukee. I like the Milwaukee Small Impact myself. Works very well. Alright, now gonna get my 2mm and we're gonna run it down. Just like tightening a wheel on a car, you want to just snug them down first. You don't want to crank them down and fully set them yet. And a cross pattern here. That way it equalizes the tension across and reduces warping, which you won't really get a whole lot on the steel, but still. Alright, now that I've done that, now I'll come in and I'll crank it a little bit. Crank it a little bit. Crank it a little bit. Every time you do one of these, you'll kind of know how far to go. Alright, so that's our center diff is built. Feels nice and smooth. I don't have grease squirting out everywhere. Bearings are turning nice and free. Alright. That's a 48 tooth lightened spur gear on that. Alright, next we're going to do either the front or the rear. It says front here, so we'll do the front diff first. It's going to go together exactly the same as this, except it's a smaller cup. You don't have to play with it as much, and the ring gear is a little different. So, I'll play with that. Alright, I hand that to Jeff. Jeff's going to play with it. Jeff likes to play with it. Alright, so we're going to do the front diff right quick. And then once we do the front diff, I think that's going to be it for this video. I'm going to try not to drag these out as long as I did on my last build. We'll take this in steps, drag it out a little bit more. I kind of rush built. my last one while doing build videos. Alright, so take our small hole ones. We're going to get all of them off to the side. Should be the same. Should be 12 of those. And 4 of them with a larger hole. And one more there, I think. Somewhere. It's stuck somewhere. It's stuck to something somewhere. Yep, there it is. Nope, that's another small hole. Let me count them. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Yes, we have the right amount of those. So I've got another one running around. Yep, there it is. Okay, it was under a diff cup hiding. Okay, so 2 diff cups, 2 cross pins, 2 stop pins, 2 suns, alright, get the stuff out of the baggie and we'll get started. Oh, those came right out. Cool. Alright, so this uses a 43 tooth by 13 tooth ring and pinion. We're going to go ahead and we're going to put bearing on there. We're going to go ahead and grease up our cup. Same thing as the center. We're going to fill the crevasse up in there, and then we're going to kind of dress the grease back a little bit. Now if this squishes grease out the end of it, it's not the end of the world on these, because they're going to be inside your bulkhead in the rear of the car or the front of the car. They aren't going to be open to the elements as much as the center diff is. So if you do get a little bit squishing out of this, not a big deal. You just don't want a ton of it because some dust will get in there, but it's not that bad. Alright, we're going to take our O-ring grease, get a little O-ring grease on there, and we're going to pop that bad boy on there. 2 large rings. Press them all the way down on there. Cross stop pin. Not as young as I used to be. My hands aren't as nimble. So let me use the tool here. Let me get that centered up. And same thing as the other one. We're going to take a dab of grease. We'll put it just on the edge of the pin there to where when I put that ring down on there, it'll stay. They're the same exact things as the middle ones. So that's going to go on there, and now, boop, okay, it's staying on there. And then I've got grease on my fingers, so I'm touching the seal. I'll line the holes up. Make sure it's pressed all the way in there. This one doesn't sit down loose. It actually fits inside this gear. So just make sure it's pressed into place. That way when you go to put it together, it doesn't come apart. A little piece of yellow plastic was stuck on there. I had to clean it off. Alright. Now, diff cup, same exact thing, just on the other side. I'll put a bearing on. We'll take our grease. Same thing. Fill the crevice up. Work grease up. Put it in there. Nice and smooth. We'll dab of O-ring grease. Get it on there. With the O-ring grease on your finger, you can actually go in there and just set that bad boy on there just like that. And the same thing with these. If you got O-ring grease on there, you can take your spacers one by one, put them on there, just swipe your finger sideways once you find the notch in there. And they're both on there. Nail nose pliers or tweezers. Gently push that down until it's fully seated into place. With the O-ring grease on there, the O-ring should pop right into its little notch. Very, very easy. So then we're going to line up our holes to where they're on the longest, widest parts. Here, 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 here. Going to take our stop pin, grab it with needle nose or tweezers. I'll step it in there and then work it in until it's centered as much as possible, like so. And then we're going to just take that gear, drop it in there, find the notch, and it's flush. Now, just like the crossbars on the center diff, we're going to do this the same way. Put those in there. We're going to have 1, 2, make sure you look at the edge of them, counting them bad boys. Be 3 there. 1, 2, 3. I know I knocked Diff over it. It'll be okay. We're going to pull that out. Flat spot facing up. I'll set that right there in that cross opening right there. Make sure the flat spot's facing up. The gears will automatically put themselves into place because that's all cut at an angle. Alright, we'll do the same thing with the other crossbar. You set it down if you want to. You know?
I'm done playing.
Babysitting.
Yeah, make sure you didn't go nowhere.
Alright. There again, we're going to count our washers. Make sure we got 3 on one side, 3 on the other. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Then we're going to pull them apart from the center. We're going to get that flat part pointing down if possible. It's more tricky to grab. We're going to line it up the other way, drop it in. It should mesh together right there. And I turned autofocus off earlier, guys, so if that camera is like twitching out and stuff, that's why. So this was the front one, right? Is that the one that said front or rear? That was front. Okay, there's the rear one. Okay, so front. I normally run a, we'll go down to it on the manual here. The front and rear diffs, they're the same physically, but they tell you in the front use 10,000 and the rear use 5,000. So in the front I'm putting 12.5. I don't have 12.5 on me, so I'm going to kind of mix my my 10,000 and my 15,000 together a little bit. So when we fill this cup, it's going to be the same. It's going to go to the top of the crossbar. So I'm going to put some 15,000 in there first. I'm going to let that sit. So it's like bubble gum. Alright, so we'll come with some 10,000 first. And of course, this bottle is going to be easier to squeeze. So I just need to get it to the opening. That sounds like a wet fart. Alright, so yep, looks like that's going to be about half. And then back to the worst possible bottle to squeeze. I don't know why they put the thicker fluid in something that's so hard to squeeze. Alright, so same thing with the other one. We're going to turn it around. Look down in there, make sure all the cracks and crevices are filling up. And it's going to be flush with the top of the crossbar. When you look at reflections in it, you shouldn't really notice any high spot in there. It should be flat. Alright, so a little bit of fluid right here. Let me just wipe that off. Then squish out. Alright, so we got our gasket here. We're going to take, line our holes up. Make sure our gear's meshed inside. We're going to do the same thing we did with the other one. We're going to take our driver, we're going to drive the screws most of the way in, and then we're going to hand tighten. I've also got my torque set down on this driver, so if it does tighten all the way up, it will clutch out so I don't strip any holes. Alright, so here we go. So we're just going to snug these up. And cross pattern. Alright, now we're going to go back and we're going to tighten them. The way I do it is once I've snugged it, it's about a quarter turn, a little less than a quarter of a turn for a full tighten. Alright, so that is a mix of fluid there, so as it runs in it'll free up a little bit, but that's about a 12.5. I say JQ recommends that you use 10,000 CST in that, but I use a little bit thicker. This increases my front drive on the car. Causes a little bit more understeer off power, oversteer on power with the higher fluid in the front. Want to play with that one too?
Yeah, sure.
Alright guys, we're going to go ahead and stop the recording for this. Next video will be building the front end. So, not sure if we're going to do that tonight or not. I'm going to finish building this other diff. Then we'll look at the time, see where we're at. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording, or I'm going to stop the recording for now. This will be the end of this video. If we continue on, we'll start another one. Alright guys, thanks for watching.